When you were young, who did you want to sound like?
Well, the first music I ever heard. Music was never played in our house until we had an older sister, and she started playing Motown records. So the first things I heard were like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, people like this. And then I started listening to people like Mark Bolan, David Bowie, Roxy Music, and I guess they were the lasting influences at that point for some period, I think. And I probably modelled myself far too much on those people at that time because, again, I didn't have enough confidence in myself. I think not even until I started my own solo career did I find a way of singing which was totally natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
It took a very long time, and it's basically because of a kind of lack of confidence in myself, I think.
Even if it's very much you these days, it still have very much connections with some of your old favorites.
Of course it must do. I mean,
like Brian Ferry, for example.
Sure. I mean, no matter if you're influenced by people when you're young, it's part of your education. You can't get away from it. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it happens in all worlds. You know, in all the arts. I mean, painters have the same problem. You know, the people who you're first influenced by are a lasting influence, and it's a positive thing. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. No. It's unfortunate. I mean, in the pop world, it's all. I think, especially when you're talking about young bands, you know, when they're still learning, when they're still discovering themselves, critics are too quick to point out the influences. And it's a negative thing to do that because it's not that relevant. I mean, especially with a young band, it's not that relevant to point out all their influences and make them aware of it and point and say it's a negative thing because it isn't necessarily so. Mm-hmm. I think it happens, you know, probably more so in this business than any other.
Yeah, you're mentioning the group Japan. I believe that many of those who know about you still connect you with that band, even though it was several years ago that it existed.
Sure. Well, it was 10 years of my life, you know, so I mean, yes, I can imagine that an emphasis is still placed on that part of my life for a lot of people.
Where are you from?
South East London. But I was brought up in the suburb of London, not in an artistic environment. My father was a builder, my mother a housewife. Me and my brother, Steve Jansen, we decided we wanted to get involved in music and started learning instruments. Steve immediately picked up on percussion, I on guitar, and I started writing immediately after I could play about 2 chords. And that's how it started. The rest of the group was formed through meetings with friends at school. I mean, there's so many groups are. And we just like clung together because we had the same ambitions, the same ideals at that time. And we learned to play our instruments together, all self-taught. And it was many years in the making, the group Japan. And we made many mistakes, many of them in public. And it wasn't until Japan's 3rd album, Quiet Life, when we began to settle down and realise, you know, our possibilities as musicians and just be able to put down our ideas positively on record for the first time. And from that period on, it was a growing process. I think Quiet Life was the happiest album we ever made. It was the easiest album, the most enjoyable album. From then on, it became more and more difficult, more and more intense to make albums together. But maybe because our ideals were getting higher, I don't know. Or maybe we were just pulling away from one another as people, wanting to go in different directions. Anyway, when we reached a kind of creative peak with the album Tin Drum, we found that we couldn't really exist together anymore comfortably because we were pulling in too many different directions, and we decided to break up the band.
What was it that you wanted to do at that time?
I suppose it was... I was getting very nervous about the kind of publicity we were receiving, and I was not enjoying being a popular pop personality. I was very uncomfortable in that role. I brought it on myself, yes, but I just didn't know how to cope with it, and I didn't realise, rather naively, how much it would interfere with my own private life. And I wanted begin to move away from that kind of public persona and really concentrate on the music and maybe move the music into a different, less commercial area. I'm not saying the other members of the band weren't interested in moving the music into less commercial areas, but I think, I mean, that was a conflict between Mick and myself. Mick enjoyed the kind of public response and wanted to play on that and keep that going. And I think that's what really pulled us two apart. And also because I was the songwriter, I was the one putting the greatest input into the group, and I think that the others felt creatively frustrated in some way. I was always open to ideas coming in, and always asking for contributions from them in writing, but they never really felt free enough to do it, or they never had the confidence to write and show me their compositions and discuss them and arrange them and so on. I mean, we got somewhere with Tin Drum, but I don't know, there was some inhibition there which we never got past, and it just had to stop.
Your position in the band creatively probably was too strong.
I think so. I think so. But I mean, to begin with, it was a positive thing, because I don't think that any of the others in the band really had ideas about direction and about composition as such, and I was leading in that respect in a positive way, but towards the end I think I was a negative influence on their own creativity. I was stifling their own creativity. Being brought up in suburban London, as in many places in the world I'm sure, is not an exciting existence, and
where was it?
In South East London. It's in Lewisham. And I think music sort of opened a door for us. We began to enjoy ourselves playing music and learning about music and writing music, but we also saw it as a way out of this environment, and that was an extremely positive point. It strengthened our ambition to move away from that situation.
It's a way to find an identity, an own one.
An own identity, and in a way to escape from yourself. I mean, it's both. I think at that age it's a kind of conflicting experience. You're really not sure what you're doing. Are you building up a kind of guise to hide behind and present to the world? I think I was doing that, being very shy by nature, and then having to get up on stage and sing songs. I mean, I purposely hid behind, a very bold image, and I think that was a mistake, because the music suffered because of it.
Is that why you had blonde hair and all that makeup?
It was partly to do with that, and partly as a kind of protest to my environment, which I disliked intensely. I mean, that's why I think a lot of young people react in that way, and find an outlet in the way they dress as a kind of protest to the way of life, they're forced to lead. And it was that, and it was having something to hide behind, most definitely. And the music at that point, unfortunately, was doing the same thing. I wasn't writing about my own experiences or about myself. I was just writing, music, images, things to hide behind. And it took a while for me to discover how. I mean, to begin with, I wrote about direct experiences about myself, but that was when I was much younger. And as I got older, I found I had to hide behind something. I became very insecure, especially when I had to present these things to the public. And it took a long time to break down those barriers I was building up. And it was when, after Japan's second album, when we knew that we had made 2 albums that we didn't like at all. This was also due to outside pressure from management and record company. We decided, well, we're either going to split up now, or we're going to, make amends and try to find the direction we want to pursue. And fortunately, we came across John Punt, a producer who was sympathetic to what we wanted to do. It was the first time we worked with a producer that, was enthusiastic about the work. My writing changed a great deal. I started writing on keyboards, and there became more melodic pieces and more introspective pieces, and that was the beginning of me finding myself as a writer.
Do you feel very much that other people regard you as a bit serious?
It may be a reasonable criticism. I do take the work very seriously. Maybe it's because, I mean, I think there's two sides of it. I do take the work very seriously, but on the other hand, I think there's too much trivia in the world, and people are too easily distracted by the trivia than anything of a serious nature. I mean, the balance of entertainment and serious art is way out of balance. It falls totally on the side of entertainment. People are constantly looking for escapism instead of looking for things that will enrich their lives in some way. And that sounds like it's going to be something very heavy, too meaningful, something that's going to be a burden to you to sit through and watch or listen to or whatever. But it isn't. If you can just give your concentration to one piece of music, one painting, one film, at one point in time, it can be uplifted and rewarded for one experience of that. Nature can last you for a year, or I mean, an experience in your life. If you go to a certain place and you have a certain experience that you find rewarding, it can last you a lifetime as a source of comfort, And the arts can have the same effect on a person's life.
I mean, the pop world isn't exactly overloaded with serious artists.
Well, yes, in a way, I'm working in an area that probably is the wrong choice to work in. But I was brought up with pop music, and I enjoy pop music, and I can see that there is it's possible to put a value in pop music and reach a lot more people than you would if you made less commercial music and you were like preaching to the converted. I mean, I want to reach as many people as possible without compromising in any way, in the hope that, as say, if 100 people bought my record, one person may get something out of it of value. That's an ideal of mine. Of course, it has to do with how successful I am in my interpretations of, in recording the pieces I do, which I'm never really sure about, just how successful I am.
You also have a fascination, it seems, to finish a song very abruptly, very suddenly, and very where you don't expect it to stop. There's a few songs like that on this new album. As a listener, you almost get surprised. Is it finished, or was it the machine that stopped?
I think it started with when I was working with John Punter in Japan's days. John had this thing about extremely slow fades. They would go on forever. And I used to enjoy that. I used to, because it kind of, if the listener's absorbed in a piece of music, the slow fading out sort of lets them out gently from the experience. But as time's gone on, I've found fading music such a strange thing to do, and with Brilliant Trees and Gone to Earth, I avoided doing that. Pieces would end. They had a definite beginning and end, except for some of the instrumental pieces. And it's just an extension of that, really. And I think that when I'm working with very simple forms of music here. I mean, forms of music that everybody understands. And you can take far more liberties with this kind of music than you could if you were doing something more abstract, because people still understand. I mean, like Ghost, for example, it was successful, I think, because it was a form that everybody understood. It was a ballad, verse, chorus, everybody understood it. But so we took it to pieces in the arrangement, but it was still recognisably a ballad, and therefore it still appealed to a lot of people, and I like that. That's why I like to work within quite a strict form.
Is that your biggest commercial success?
Ghost, yes.
As a song?
As a song.
As a single?
Yeah. It's something, I mean, I've continued to work that way. Still ballads. I mean, I love writing ballads, and I still find it gives me a lot of freedom to play with the arrangements, and still the pieces of music remain accessible to a lot of people.